I've argued many times before in the past for why socialism doesn't work, tirelessly on the economic calculation problem, etc. So for the purpose of this argument, we're just going to take a look at Xexizy's own argument, and if you analyse his body language, you will see he's very much uncomfortable.
I am 100% serious. I got halfway through watching it, making notes on what I was going to say. I wanted to give up. I did not want to do it because it's just so bad.
Proved communism to be rather incapable in its quest for realizing an advanced and absolute egalitarian society.
The good old communism has never worked meme. We'll get to that later, because he does bring it up again, obviously.
Almost everybody who has heard of the word has a basic, albeit simple understanding of the kind of society it imagines.
Here's the thing though, they actually don't have a basic understanding at all. Seriously, the average person today knows the same amount about communism as they do about quantum physics, and that's not even hyperbole.
Simply put, communism pushes for a world governed by absolute egalitarianism more than anything else.
This is basically the communism means equality for everyone on everything meme, but expanded on. And see, you've actually just proven the point I was making by trying to give an explanation of what communism is.
It was also socialism that first advocated for the state to take sole and absolute control of the forces and means of production and distribution in the society.
You see, your problem here is you haven't actually defined what socialism as an economic system is. So you're just coming out with this random bullshit about the state owns everything, and I don't know what you think socialism is, but I can tell you now it's wrong. Socialism is worker ownership of the means of production, not state ownership of the means of production. This is basic shit I've had to just explain to people since I've been fucking 16. It's fucking ridiculous.
So you can see everything that Xexizy basically argues is purely based on theory of communism, and if it isn't based on the theory, then apparently it's not communism, it's not socialism in general. So the Asian guy is actually completely spot on for what he has to say with regards to socialism as a whole, because this is the socialism we have seen in the real world. The theory of communism is this idea of a classless based system that is moneyless. If you've got no money, you're therefore faced with the economic calculation problem. Not only does the study of economics defy them, but human nature. Look around you in practice. People are demanding higher paid wages, which goes to tell you that just because you have the good intentions doesn't mean to say it turns out that way in practice. Even at that argument, you could turn your attention to trying to remove private individual ownership. Well, they've only got one option, and that is basically through a government. But every time they do this, the government becomes more and more powerful, it gains more and more control, and then through every example we see in history of the public ownership of the means of production, public ownership, the state always takes ownership. Never do you see it going into the hands of the people. It isn't the people who's setting the prices. Who do you think is the one who controls and distributes? It's always in the hands of the state. That's the world of the socialism we have always seen. So if you take a look at this, for example, he's turning to that of a book, and he's reading word for word from that of the idealists of communism. However, he doesn't acknowledge the fact that what he is reading is nothing other than based on theory. Therefore, he doesn't understand the difference between theory and practice. He has no understanding that just because you may intend for something to be that way doesn't mean to say that it turns out that way in practice because of consequences. And this is what a lot of socialists don't understand. They don't understand that there are consequences for your actions. An example of the intentions and consequences, again, you could look at, for example, their intention to make a moneyless based system.
Forced collectivization.
Okay, so I'll make clear already, and even the Stalinists would agree with me here, that collectivization is not a feature of communism, but rather a context-dependent method used by Stalin to prepare feudal Russia to take the first steps towards socialism.
You will always find where they will tell you that you don't understand communism or you don't understand socialism, but they really don't understand it themselves. Because you only have two options with regards to agriculture. You haven't got any other options. You can either choose between private individual ownership of agriculture, or you can have communal ownership of property. Now there lies the entire issue, because it all comes down to, do you want decentralisation or do you want political centralisation? Because when it comes to the name socialism, that's what it means. Socialism means centralisation. When you speak about socialising healthcare, or socialising education, or socialising agriculture, or socialising anything with regards to socialism, to socialise something is to collectivise it, means to centralise it. So when you speak about the time before the enclosure movement, before the Industrial Revolution, well, you're speaking about communal ownership of property. This was political centralisation. So it didn't just stem from that of Joseph Stalin. This was something that pertained to that of communism and socialism in general.
Next, lack of basic human rights. Communism in theory is a philosophical imagining of a utopian society where citizens of the state are ultimately able to share resources and benefits according to need, where property serves as the common good for all. Communism in practice, however, has realized only authoritarian society so far.
Now this is blatant misinformation and just outright lying. And I've been holding off going into this for all the other times he's mentioned it, but now let's really get into it. Now, most of you may know that I've actually made an entire video going on all the times that socialism has been successfully implemented, and it's been pretty good, and it hasn't led to evil dictatorship or evil genocide or any of that stuff. Okay? You probably don't know about most of these places because you never really taught about them in school, because why would you? But I think the best examples to use would be the Paris, German and Hungarian communes, and also revolutionary Catalonia. And when I say Germany and Hungary, I'm not referring to Soviet Union, Germany and Hungary in like the mid-20th century. I'm talking about the start of the 20th century when they had their own separate revolutions, literally just after the Soviet Union had even become a thing. In fact, no, it wasn't even called the Soviet Union by the time these guys had their revolutions. And they set up their own communes, which lasted a while, but then kind of got crushed by fascism. We'll get into that. So these countries all established a dictatorship of the proletariat and worker ownership of the means of production, meaning that the workers themselves had full control over the state, through recallable at any time representatives, which were at the mercy of the workers themselves. These representatives were paid workbound wages and also were chosen by the working class themselves.
He touches upon the examples of socialism working apparently from that of the likes of the Paris Commune, etc., but then states that they basically had a wage and then eventually fascists stepped in and crushed the regime. Well, this is the thing, everything's all short-lived. Even the example of the anarchist Catalonia, which, by the way, wasn't even anarchist, it was a regime that turned to terror. But these examples he uses for such success, he mentioned that they used a wage. So, since they were getting paid wages, where did the money come from? The money has to come from somewhere. You've only got two options. You've got that of the private sector or you've got that of the printing press. And as I've said so many times before, if you're going to run the printing press, you're destined for that of hyperinflation. The economy is never going to sustain itself. So there spells the problem. If they argue in favour of a wage, not only are they defying the theory of communism being moneyless, they're basically arguing for something that will be destined for failure because they've got no other option but to turn to the private sector.
Failure to adapt. Among the most prominent reasons why a Marxist setup of society tends to collapse upon itself is because of its inability to adapt to the changing conditions that exists outside of its prescribed reality.
What the fuck are you even talking about? What? I don't even know where to begin.
It doesn't know how to technologically improve, and this was an argument made by Friedrich A. von Hayek on what we call the knowledge problem. Now, the knowledge problem is where you are faced with the very problem that you don't understand the technical information of what goes into producing such things in a vast economy. Now, you may argue, for example, that in your theoretical fantasy world of this communism, that each and every single individual all have their own free will to go and do their own thing, their own career. That wouldn't make sense, because then you'd be speaking about capitalism. Your entire system is based around collectivization and that of communal ownership of property, etc., etc. You require the information of knowing what goes into such production. A good example of that was by Thomas J. DiLorenzo, speaking about how a pizza is produced. It's not just as simple as saying, oh well, we just put it in the oven and blah 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 and that's it, it's cooked, it's done. You have to look into the tools, the machines. How is the microwave oven produced? What machines went into actually producing such parts in order for the microwave oven to be produced, or ovens to be produced? What is it that went into producing it? All of these things, the technical information behind all of that. And then you have all the technical information that you require from prices in order to know how you actually go around and improving such things in terms of technology. And that was the main reason for why in every single socialist system you've seen, it's always been backwards. For example, British Rail with its outdated trains, or that of Cuba with the outdated cars from that driving about in cars that have been around since the 1950s.
For instance, the fluctuation that occurs in a free market economy is a real-world riddle that Marxism economists were unable to solve.
Market fluctuations are something Marxists can't solve. Market fluctuations. Are you kidding me? Are you actually telling me that Marxism says that the prices of commodities are always constant? Kill yourself.
Well, that's the thing. When it comes to Marxism, they view prices as something endogenous rather than what is exogenous. So under Marxism, they have this view that value is something objective rather than what is subjective, as I've mentioned before, and actually done a response video on that explaining about the Marxist labour theory of value. If you support the fluctuation of prices and prices being free to be set itself by the laws of supply and demand, you are essentially saying that you support free market capitalism. Socialism is all about control over the political system and control over the economy. When it comes to socialism, yes, it is about price fixing. A good example of that would be a rent control. Socialists try to fix prices above or below market value. And so what you're doing is you're completely redefining everything of what socialism stands for and everything to do with communism. You're now actually trying to correlate communism with that of free market driven prices, which is completely and wholly irrational. Really what it comes down to is Xexizy, you really don't understand communism, you don't understand socialism at all, and just everything about the entire ideology. And that's what I mean, folk. So anyway, folk, thank you for watching my video, and I shall talk to you later. Cheers.